Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining me for another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. I'm Lady TrenettWilson, and I want to welcome everyone who is new to the channel. And of course, my royalers, my loyal members, thank you all so much for tuning in. I wanted to do this video today because recently, Miss Tina Knowles went down to Houston, Texas, to the rodeo, and she brought her gumbo. Now, reviews were mixed. Texas gumbo is different from Louisiana gumbo, but it brought to my mind to do a lecture on the Creole population within Louisiana during the antebellum period, and explaining to you how they were the black elite during that time period in that place. So I thought it'd be a great conversation to have and to introduce you to a very important person of the time period named Norbert Rillieux. And he is the man who really revolutionized how sugarcane was made. And that was very important because extracting sugarcane was really a arduous process for the slaves. And any help they could get, they definitely needed it. So we're going to get into him today, but I want to back up and give a little bit of context to who the Creole people are. And they are beautiful people. They existed within a complex social world that existed between cultures, languages, and racial categories. So they were very different, and they were usually referred to Creoles as people who were born in the colonies rather than being born in Europe or in Africa. But in places like Louisiana and the Caribbean, Creole identity included a mixture of African, French, Spanish, and Native ancestry. So the Creole to me, people are a beautiful mix, a big gumbo of a person because they have so many ancestries in them. So they're very interesting people. My best friend, in fact, was Creole growing up. So she was one of my best friends. So she was a great girl. So in Louisiana, especially in the Creole society, they developed a distinct culture, and that included the French and Spanish language, and that influenced how they spoke. And they have a beautiful accent if you've never heard it. The Catholic tradition and unique food, music, and customs. So that's very important that they kind of created their own community. And they were, of course, mixed race, oftentimes people, as we talked about here. Now, there are white Creoles and there are black Creoles. So you may see a completely white person and they're calling themselves a Creole person. So I just want to let you know that as well. Put me a like down below. Are you Creole? Do you know about what I'm talking about here? Are you from Louisiana? Love the food. And so with that in mind, I wanted to bring up Norbert Rillieux. Now, Mr. Rillieux was the earliest chemical engineer there in Louisiana. And so for a black man to be an engineer at that time was really extraordinary. He was born March the 17th, 1806. Now, his father's name was Vincent, and he was a white plantation owner. And his mother's name was Constance, and she was a free black woman. And they lived together openly there in Louisiana. They lived on the plantation together. And he had seven siblings. So at that time, there was kind of like an agreement, if the plantation owner kept a woman, she happened to be black, then that was just his woman. So that's what it was. Now, they also had Norbert had some really famous family members as well. One named Edgar Degas, excuse me, and he was a painter, and Bernard Sully. He was the wealthiest Creole man in Louisiana. Have you ever heard of any of these names? Put it down below. Let me know. Let me know. Now, because he came from a well-to-do family, he didn't have to go to school where everybody else went to school, right? They created this little community within themselves. So he attended a Catholic school. And after he was done with Catholic school, he went on to Paris, where he studied to become an engineer. And he studied at one of their top engineering schools called École Centrale Paris. And so he studied there. He studied physics, mathematics, and engineering. And he became so good at it, with even with steam engines, that he became the youngest teacher at that school in the 1830s. He was only 24 years old. Now, what brought him back to America was that his father and his brother were getting to a contract agreement to build a sugarcane refinery. Now, they were looking for ways to refine the sugar better. As I was talking about how Louisiana was a real big place for sugarcane plantations, and it was very arduous getting it out. And they would spill a lot of it, and then it would heat unevenly, so they would lose a lot of their crops. And so that was a real problem. But sugarcane was about a $25 million business back in 1858. So when we look at slavery and why people own slaves, this is really a reason, because it was big business. And black people were not looked at, or slaves in general were not looked at as people. They were a commodity. And unfortunately, in Louisiana, if there was black ownership of slaves, which there was, it was usually came out of the Creole people, the people who were light skinned. And so there was a lot of colorism going on in that time period. And so there's a lot of pain that comes out of, slavery. And so it's good for us to talk about it so we can understand what happened, who was where, what was going on. Because I also want to say this too, even though there were some who they were, treated black people bad, they owned them, but then there were also some that also helped black people as well. In 1811, called the German Coast Uprising, which was a slave rebellion. I put the link down below so you can see all the slave rebellions across North America, but it was, whew. So there were people who did still stand up for black people and slaves. Now, while he was in France, he started researching how can we make this sugar cane easier, where I can heat it up evenly and we can prevent so much spillage. And that's what happened. He created it from 1834 to 1843. So it took him almost 9 years to create this product. Now, when he came back to America, like I said, they were getting ready to open up a sugarcane factory with this man named Edwin Forstall. But they fell out. The family fell out. Mr. Forstall, but they fell out. So Mr. Forstall they didn't open the sugarcane factory. So even years later, Forstall, when Norbert came up with a solution to help with, they had a big old outbreak of yellow fever in 1850, and it was being caused by the mosquitoes. And instead of Forstall, because he was a legislator at the time, accepting his plan, he rejected it, and a lot of more people died because of it. So years later, they did adopt it, but they didn't give Norbert the credit that they should have given him. So anyway, it addressed the burning cane and the spillage. And we're back to its invention, and it was patented. Now, it was first installed at the Theodore Packwood Myrtle Plantation, and it went from there. By the time it was over, he had convinced 13 Louisiana sugar factories to use his invention. By 1849, Merrick in town was able to make 18,000 pounds of sugar because of his invention. But that wasn't all. Again, he was just an inventor, and he kept on doing it, and he began to extract sugar from beets, even in his old age. But what happened in his old age was sad, because in the 1850s, he moved back to Paris because of the racism. So here he is, a Creole man, very light skinned, and that was a thing. They were very light skinned, but these people definitely let them know that they were not white. And because of this racism, and they were experiencing this racism, especially with his patents. So what would happen is they would really kind of list him as a black man only, and because of that, they would make him a slave, even though his mother was a free woman. And if you were free, you didn't have to be, categorized as such. So it was a lot going on. He left, and that's where he passed away in 1894 at 88 years old. There's a memorial in Louisiana State Museum of him. Now, his wife was named Emily Cacao, but I don't have any pictures of her, and no pictures of him other than this one. So I hope that you learned a lot about the Creole population. Please put your likes down below and tell me a little bit about you. If you are Creole, about your family, I would love to hear about it, and I love to read the comments. So I thank you for joining me for another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. Now remember, my lectures are for entertainment and educational purposes only, and the Fair Act use is in my description. Now click down below. Y'all look at the Blue Vein Society, look at the uprisings. Y'all keep learning. Thank you for joining me.